What if one day you just disappeared, not by accident, not by tragedy, but because God took you? This happened to a man named Enoch. The Bible doesn't say much, just one line, but one of the strongest. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. How can someone walk with God to the point of disappearing from the earth? What was it about this man that made heaven decide not to wait for death to take him? Get ready for a short story, but one that echoes throughout eternity. God still takes to himself those who walk with him. Before Enoch was taken, there was silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of sin. The world was in its early centuries. Creation still carried the freshness of Eden, but the heart of man was already rotten with vanity, violence, selfishness, and deviance. Adam's children multiplied, but they did not multiply the presence of God. The earth began to fill up, but the sky was beginning to recede. Births, deaths, genealogies, and suddenly a name shines amidst the cold stones. Enoch, son of Jared, father of Methuselah, descendant of Seth, an ordinary man born into a warped world. But he decided not to conform. The Bible says, "And Enoch lived 65 years and begat Methuselah, and Enoch walked with God." Genesis 5:21-22. This sentence changes everything, because everyone else, they lived, they had children. By dying, they left space for the next generation. But Enoch walked with God. Not only did I know, not just create, he was going. In the midst of a perverse generation, he chose the opposite direction. He had no temple, there was no Bible, he had no priesthood, there was no crowd, but he was hungry, and that was enough. Each morning, Enoch arose and walked with someone invisible. I was talking to someone that no one could see. He trusted a voice that only he could hear, and that was enough. While the world ran after riches, buildings, personal glory, Enoch ran after eternal steps. He learned to listen, to wait, to empty itself, to love a God who had not yet fully revealed himself. And the further the world got, the closer Enoch came. For 3 centuries he walked with God. 300 years of constancy, 300 years of devotion, 300 years of silent renunciation. And with every step, the sky became closer than the earth, until one day, Enoch was simply gone. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Genesis 5:24. There was no announcement, there was no fuss, there was no wake, just it disappeared. Because heaven said, "This one no longer needs to taste death. You are already closer to me than to the earth. Come, Enoch, today you walk with me here in my kingdom." The walk became a transfer. Faith became vision. The invisible became an encounter. And he went, not because it was perfect, but because he walked. And whoever walks with God never gets lost. What does it mean to walk with God? Is it praying too much? Is it fasting until the body trembles? Is it escaping from the world? Enoch did not have an organized religion. There was no synagogue. There were no Torah scrolls. He had no prophet to consult him, nor a system of worship to guide him. He had something that many today have lost: hunger for God. And this hunger was not noisy. There was no need for a stage. It didn't depend on likes. It was an internal, continuous, insistent movement. He walked with God when everyone else was walking with the world. While men sought to multiply their fame, Enoch sought the company of the unseen. Walking with God is choosing his ways. When no one else is walking beside you, it's keeping his rhythm. When everyone around is running in the opposite direction, it is hearing his voice amidst the noise of sin. It's following even when it's dark. It is to obey without a map. And Enoch walked, day after day, year after year. And the walk with God changes man's pace. His voice begins to sound clearer than your own heart. The world begins to lose its shine, and the sky begins to feel like home. Many times Enoch must have walked in silence. No response, no signal, but he continued, because whoever walks with God does not walk by sight, walk by faith, and this faith pleases heaven. The author of Hebrews writes, By faith Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and he was not found because God had translated him. For before his translation he had this testimony, that he pleased God. Hebrews 11:5. This is the mark of those who walk with God. Please him. They don't please the system. They don't please the crowd. They don't please the trends. But when the sky watches them, smile. And on the ground, the earth does not understand. Perhaps they called Enoch strange, fanatic, antisocial, offline. But Enoch did not walk to be understood. He was walking to be found. And he went. In the midst of a corrupt world, God looked at Enoch and said, "You please me, and I will not wait for death. I'll get you myself." And this teaches us something brutally beautiful. Walking with God can take you off the earth before your time. You may not see many external results. It may not garner applause. It may even disappear from the eyes of the world. But if heaven is watching you, you are already on the right track. Maybe today the world will continue moving forward, running, deviating. But God still looks for those who walk with him. People who do not negotiate the rhythm of the Spirit, which does not speed up the process, that doesn't mix with the noise. People who walk and keeps walking. Such was Enoch, and the same invitation is extended to you today. Enoch walked with God, but the world was moving in the opposite direction. The generations multiplied from Adam, but along with them, corruption, pride, violence, and idolatry grew. The seed of Eden was getting further and further away. The hearts of men are heavier. They lived as if God had been forgotten, but God never forget. And in the midst of this humanity that was moving away from the Creator, a man walked closer. And that bothered me, because Enoch's life was a mirror. His silence confronted, his search denounced, their fellowship humbled those who lived for themselves. The Bible does not say that Enoch preached, but his walk was already a sermon. And according to the book of Jude, Enoch also prophesied. And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, "Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment on all." Jude 1:14-15. Yes, Enoch was a prophet, and what was your message? Judgment. He spoke of a God who would come, of a God who would judge, of a God who would not close his eyes to evil. Imagine this. A man at the beginning of human history, already announcing the second coming of Christ, speaking of holiness, calling to repentance, awakening an anesthetized generation, and of course, he was ignored, because it's always easier to reject the messenger than changing the heart. But Enoch did not stop. He kept walking. He continued speaking. He continued to move away from the system and approaching the sky, and that's why he was taken. Because while everyone wanted the land, Enoch wanted God. He didn't build cities, he didn't write books, he did not found famous lineages, but it became a sign, a warning, a living reminder that it is still possible to walk with God, even when no one else wants to. His walk betrayed it. Their communion was resistance. Their faith was a silent protest against growing sin. And this teaches us something powerful. Walking with God is not just about getting closer to heaven, is to move away from what the world loves. You can't have it both ways. You can't walk with God and run with the system. You cannot be intimate with heaven and an accomplice with earth. Enoch made his choice, and therefore he was found faithful. Heaven did not let him die, because his life had already surpassed time. And maybe the world didn't notice. But the heavens knew the righteous had finished his journey and God took him. How do you learn to walk with God when there's no manual? How do you hear a voice when the whole world is screaming? Enoch didn't have our advantages. He didn't have chapters and verses to consult. He didn't have worship songs to play on his headphones. He didn't have a community of believers to encourage him. What he had was something much more primal, much more fundamental: silence and hunger. Enoch's world was already noisy, not with the noise of cars and technology, but with the noise of the human soul in rebellion. the noise of Lamech's pride, which boasted of his murders, the noise of the building of cities named after men, not God, the noise of violence, greed, and self-sufficiency. It was a world that screamed, "We don't need God." And amidst all this noise, Enoch chose silence. He learned that to hear the voice of heaven, he must first silence the noise of the earth, and especially the noise of his own heart. His walk with God was, for the most part, a silent walk. And in that silence, he developed a hunger the world could not satisfy, a hunger for justice amidst corruption, a hunger for peace amidst violence, a hunger for truth amidst lies, a hunger for presence amidst absence. This hunger led him to seek, to cry out, to wait. I imagine Enoch, day after day, withdrawing, leaving behind the empty conversations, the struggles for power, the incessant pursuit of earthly things. He found a place where he could simply be, and in that place he spoke to his Creator, not with memorized prayers, but with the outpouring of a hungry soul. He didn't just speak, he listened. He learned to discern the still, small voice of the Spirit amidst the whirlwind of his own culture. He learned the language of heaven, a language not made of words, but of presence, of peace, of conviction. And the more he listened, the more his very being transformed. His walk, his gaze, his peace, everything about him began to echo the frequency of heaven. He became a stranger in his own land, not because he physically isolated himself, but because his soul no longer belonged there. Silence was not empty for Enoch. It was the place of encounter. It was the altar where he offered his attention and received God's guidance. And this teaches us that even today, in our deafening world, the call to walk with God begins the same way, tuning out the outside noise so we can hear the voice that speaks within. Walking with God for 300 years is not a feat of human endurance. It is the result of a divine connection. But what was the secret? What was in Enoch's heart that made him so special in the eyes of the Creator? The answer is not in Genesis, but in Hebrews, in the great hall of the heroes of faith. The sacred author gives us the key. By faith, Enoch was translated. For before his translation, he had this testimony that he pleased God, pleasing God. Consider the weight of this statement. In a world that had already become a disappointment to heaven, one man lived in a way that brought a smile to the Creator's face. And how did he do it? The next verse reveals, "And without faith it is impossible to please him, for he who comes to God must believe that he exists, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him." Hebrews 11:6. This was the essence of Enoch. His faith was not a passive belief. It was an active, daily, and tireless search. He not only believed in the existence of God, he lived in anticipation of finding him. He believed that God was not a distant and disinterested creator, but a rewarder, a father who delights in being found by those who seek him with a sincere heart. Enoch's faith was the certainty that his solitary journey was not in vain. It was the conviction that every step taken toward the unseen was noted in heaven. While the men of his generation built legacies of clay and stone, Enoch built a legacy of faith. While they lived for the here and now, for what they could see and touch, Enoch lived for the unseen, for the promise of a heavenly reality. He taught his son, Methuselah, not only to survive on earth, but to look to the heavens. He looked at the stars and saw not just points of light, but the signature of an artist. He felt the wind, and he felt not just the air, but the breath of the Spirit. Everything around him became a testament to the presence of the one with whom he walked. This testimony that he had pleased God was not a prize he received at the end. It was the atmosphere he cultivated throughout his life. His entire existence became an act of worship, a declaration that it was worth seeking God above all else. And God responded to this search in a spectacular way. Heaven looked down upon earth and saw a man whose heart no longer fit for this world. And the reward for this faith was not gold nor longevity on earth. It was God himself. Enoch's walk with God was not just a silent, mystical experience. He had a voice, and that voice was prophetic. Many imagine Enoch as a peaceful man, floating through life in a meditative state. But the book of Jude in the New Testament reveals a different and powerful facet. Enoch was a preacher of judgment. He not only walked in communion with God, he spoke God's harsh words to a generation that needed to hear them. Jude writes, "And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment on all." Jude 1:14-15. Stop for a moment and grasp the magnitude of this. At the dawn of human history, when the world was still young, Enoch wasn't prophesying about local kings or tribal battles. He was seeing the end of time. He was heralding the second coming of Christ. He spoke of a Lord who would return not as a silent savior, but as a powerful judge, accompanied by thousands of his saints. His message was a direct confrontation with the culture of his time. To a world sinking into wickedness, murmuring selfish desires and self-serving flattery, Enoch brought a message of responsibility. He said, "God is watching, and he will come to judge." He was a beacon of truth in an age of growing darkness. Imagine the reactions: mockery, contempt, perhaps even threats. He was the party pooper, the pessimist who spoke of a judgment no one wanted to consider. In a world that celebrated human autonomy, he spoke of divine sovereignty. But that didn't stop him. His communion with God did not isolate him from reality. On the contrary, it gave him the clarity to see the inevitable fate of sin and the courage to proclaim it. This adds a layer of steel to his story. His walk was not an escape, it was an engagement. He walked with God, and because of that, he stood against the spirit of his generation. He was not just a man of faith, he was a man of truth. And this truth was uncomfortable. His translation then takes on new meaning. It was not only a reward for his piety, but also a seal of approval on his message. By taking him, God was saying to that entire generation, "The one you ignored spoke for me." And the judge he spoke of is real, and he is coming. 300 years, think about it. 300 years walking in the same direction, at the same pace, with the same divine companion. Enoch's journey with God was so long, so constant, so profound, that the very fabric of reality began to shift for him. The translation was not a sudden event, a celestial abduction. It was the natural conclusion of a lifetime of rapprochement. With each step Enoch took with God on earth, he took a step closer to heaven. With each silent conversation, each act of obedience, each renunciation of the world, the veil between the two realities grew thinner. His spirit began to become lighter than matter. His ears became more attuned to heavenly harmonies than to earthly noises. His eyes began to see the glory of the unseen more clearly than the corruption of the seen. Earth became the foreign place, and heaven became the home that called him. And then one day, it happened. It was no different from any other day. Enoch probably got up, as he always did, to begin his daily walk. He took a step, then another, and another. But one of those steps didn't touch the ground of the earth, it touched the ground of heaven. He simply kept walking and crossed the border. The Bible describes it with disconcerting simplicity. And he was not, for God took him. Genesis 5:24. He was not found. He left no body behind. There was no mourning, no funeral. There was simply an absence, an empty space where a righteous man once stood. People must have searched, his family, his acquaintances. Where is Enoch? But they couldn't find him because you can't find someone on earth who has already reached their destination in heaven. God took him, not like a thief, but like a father who comes to pick up his child at the school gate at the end of the day. Class was over. The journey was complete. Death, the last enemy, was simply ignored. God looked at Enoch and said, "You are already ready. You already live in a way that no longer belongs here. There is no need to pass through the gate of death. come home by the direct path. Enoch's translation is the greatest testimony that a life of communion with God has a certain destiny. It is proof that it is possible to live in such a way that death becomes merely an irrelevant detail in the script of our eternity. Enoch's story isn't about a spectacular ending. It's about a constant path. It's not about the destination, but about the journey. He didn't leave behind pyramids or empires, but he did leave a question that echoes to this day. Who are you walking with? The world still runs in opposite directions, seeking fame, pleasure, and power. The noise is still deafening. Distraction is still seductive. But God's invitation remains the same, whispered in the silence of the heart of the hungry. Walk with me. Enoch teaches us that great feats aren't necessary, just consistent steps. A grand platform isn't necessary, just a hungry heart. You don't need to be perfect, just present. God still seeks those today who, like Enoch, choose his company above all else. People who don't compromise on the pace, who don't sell themselves to the noise, who aren't afraid to walk against the grain. He still seeks those whose hearts please heaven, and for them, the promise is the same. The journey may be long, it may be lonely, but the destination is certain. One day you will take a step, and you will no longer be here. You will be home. If this message about walking with God touched your heart, share this video with someone who needs encouragement on their journey. Comment below, "I walk with God," as an act of faith and commitment. And for more stories that bring us closer to heaven, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The journey continues.